Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Ken Paulson. I urge you to vote no on 65S. But I had a few paragraphs here to read that were in the paper that I thought were interesting. It says, when official reasons for taking action don't make sense, it's a good bet that the stated reasons aren't the real reasons. Take the effort by Pierce County Council and the county executive to delay, disrupt, and even kill off instant runoff voting experiment that was approved by the voters over the objections of the established political establishment. There's nothing wrong with IRV, sometimes called ranked choice voting, that can't be fixed in time for the 2008 election. That's what Auditor Pat McCarthy says after working all spring with a task force to implement the system. So why is the council and the executive saying the system won't work, or at least can't be made to work by next year? Could it be because council members are running for executive and they don't want to be subject to a voting system they can't control or predict? Or could it be that they don't like it in the first place and they resent the voters, that the voters didn't listen to them? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Your name for the record, please.
Mr. Chair and members of the council, my name is Jim Walton from Tacoma, and I rise to speak to encourage you to vote against 2007 65S for the reasons that the previous speakers had mentioned. I would just add, one of the candidates for president has a proposal that would change the government to be government by referendum. I would hope that that is not what we're doing here in Pierce County by passing decisions that can be made legislatively, or corrections that could be made legislatively to the people of Pierce County. They have spoken. They expect this council, I think, I know I do, to make decisions where that's appropriate, and I think any technical fixes needed to this particular item can be accomplished through an ordinance, and I would encourage you to do so. Thank you.
See no one else? Going. Close public comment. Ms. Schmidtke did mention some differences of language related to the elimination of rounds, if you will, after rounds. Ms. Long, can you touch on the differences between, there's three versions here, one version and the other version?
Okay. Mary can correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but I believe she was referring to the language that you will see in 2007 68S, section 410, subsection 2, that explains how the ranking and elimination process would work. I believe it was the suggestion of the auditor and Mary to include that language also into 65S. So you'd simply strike subsection 2 and replace it with the subsection 2 language in 68S. There wouldn't be a conflict. It simply explains, I believe, how it would actually be conducted. I wouldn't include the up to 3 candidates in subsection 1. That would limit you. I think the language is fine the way it is, not specifying all or 3 or any other number. But that section 2, I think, would clarify the process.
And so just so I'm clear, we have 3 different ordinances. This ordinance and the third ordinance have one set of election procedure round counting. Actually, the original language that came to us from the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Subsequent to that, I think Mr. Cox, working with the auditor's office, came up with some language that was a little clearer, and that got amended into one of these in committee.
Correct.
Which is 68S, Mr. Lee's ordinance, the next one, but is not in Mr. Murray's or the executive request legislation from the auditor's office. Okay. So my sense is that the round language and the counting language is requested by the auditor's office that got into one of the versions but not the three versions. It should be in all three versions if there's any possibility that any of the three versions may make it to the ballot. And I see the auditor's staff shaking their head. So I'm not sure what others members' thoughts are on that, but my sense would be to take a recess and allow staff. I'd hate to make oral amendments, take page 2 from Amendment 1 and stick it into Ordinance 3. I'd rather have it something in writing. This is a pretty important thing we're working on here. Any other thoughts before I take us to recess? We'll be at recess for 10 minutes. It's 2005-65S, and Ms. Schmidtke brought a very important issue to our attention, and that was, there's the substance of the amendment, which folks may or may not agree with. There's the substance of the amendment, which folks may or may not agree with, but then there's the format of the counting system, irregardless of how many folks you're counting. And I think to have all of the amendments, at least in the right form, again, irregardless of what you think about the substantive amendment, was a good catch on Ms. Schmidtke's part, and we appreciate the auditor's office bringing that to our attention. So staff has crafted amendments relatively technical in nature that simply replicate the formatting of the counting that you find in 68S and drafted the amendment for 65S and 63S3. Is that correct? All right. So with that, we are on 65S, and we do have an amendment on blue. Mr. Bunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move Council Amendment number 1 on blue.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to adopt Council Amendment number 1 on blue. Even though I kind of explained it already, why don't you just briefly again explain, Ms. Long, what we're doing here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This would strike subsection 2 in its entirety from Exhibit A of 2007-65S and replace it with the language that explains the process for IRV, as you will see in 2007-68S, so that whichever of these or all of them, whatever does pass, it will be a uniform process in the charter.
The counting and the rounds process.
Correct. Exactly.
And it's my understanding that this language that did make it into one of them, but not all three, was a workout of the auditor's office and Mr. Cox on our staff. And I see the auditor nodding her head yes. All right. So it's the request of the auditor's office that all the formats be all the same, irregardless of what we think about the policy included in them. I see the auditor nodding her head yes. Okay. So that is the amendment before us. Any questions or comments by members of the council before we proceed into public hearing on the amendment? Mr. Bunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted someone to go through the nuance between the counting in the rounds on the blue amendment and the language that we're striking, the nuance difference.
Ms. McCarthy, welcome.
Thank you. The Pierce County Auditor.
Why do we need this new language?
Well, this language was not in 65. And I think the case that Mary was trying to make, Ms. Schmidtke was trying to make, was this is important language in helping us process this election and doing the reporting of this election. So if you're going to pass out any one of these provisions, what we want is the same language in each one. And do you want further explanation of it?
I got that it's important language, okay, and we took a recess to get it here. I'm just trying to understand the nuance of what was in the IRV charter amendment that the voters approved that this alters, and what does this clarify for us?
In the charter